fear is something that I don't think we think about often enough, or we give enough consideration to it. And the reason why is that fear shapes so much of what we do and what we don't do in our lives, especially when we're not conscious of it. And I think most of the time we're not conscious of it. We only really think about it if we're watching a horror movie or if it's Halloween. Most of the rest of the time we don't think about it, even though it is affecting us. So there's an acronym for the word fear. It's not the most famous acronym in the world, but I like to introduce it every time I give this talk. And that is, fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear may have been a lot more useful to us as a race a long time ago. And sometimes, even in this age, it can be helpful. But most of the time, these days, fear works against us. It's our mind playing tricks on us. And the reason why, the difference between years ago, like hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, and now, is that now we have access to information. Limitless access to information. So we don't need to feel fear in many of the situations that we had to in the past. In the past, fear protected us. In the present, fear works against us. Now, you might be a bit more familiar with this little diagram. This has popped up around in schools and universities and businesses all over the world. It's a lovely, simple little diagram. So we have a little circle which is represented as your comfort zone, and then a much bigger circle outside of that circle where the magic happens. So it's fairly self-explanatory. But one very important thing about this extremely simple diagram is that the two circles are not touching. There's a space between them. So that means that when we want to achieve the things that we want to achieve, or have the things we want to have, we can't just sort of step over to them. We have to take a leap. We have to leap outside of our comfort zone. I want to quickly run through the benefits of challenging yourself, of stepping outside of your comfort zone, before we go any further. So, first benefit, increased decisiveness. Some of this is going to be fairly obvious to you, but some of it is the kind of thing that we just need a reminder of from time to time. So increased decisiveness, all that simply means is that the things that you want, you are more likely to obtain them the more decisive you are. If you're indecisive, you're more likely to obtain and to do the things that your friends and your family want you to do, or that your colleagues or that your boss wants you to do. And a lot of the time, that's fine. But to get the things that you really want yourself, you need to be more decisive. Stepping outside your comfort zone will make you more decisive. The next thing is increased self-reliance, and then better focus. Focus is something which is in very short supply these days, very short supply. 50 years ago, focus was it was just a whole different thing. It was a lot easier to focus. Things have changed so radically in worlds of advertising, media, technology, that you have so many things screaming for your attention. And these aren't all necessarily bad things. It's just that when you want to do like a project that you're working on, or a task that you need to complete, you need focus to do that and to do it well. But it's constantly being taken away from you by your phone, by your computer, by advertising. Dealing with problems, okay, that's fairly self-explanatory. And then the final one, reduced resistance to change. Change is the most inevitable thing in this life. Even though there are times in our lives where we feel that change just isn't happening, that it's just the same day after day after day, change is always going to happen. If you are in a good situation right now, in a relationship, or in work, or in some other aspect of your life, that good situation is guaranteed to change. You may have no influence over that change. You may not see the change coming, and you may not know when it's going to happen, or how it's going to happen. But how you react to the change is the biggest impacting factor. How you react to it. If you resist it, it's not going to go as well for you. The same goes for if you're in a bad situation, in a relationship, or in work, or in some other part of your life. That bad situation is also guaranteed to change. But it's how we react to that change that has the biggest impact. At this stage in my talk, I usually talk about how we have irrational fears and rational fears, and the difference between the two. We don't have a lot of time today, so I'm only going to detail one irrational fear today. So, irrational fears, for anyone who isn't clear on this, So irrational fear is something where if you don't have that fear, you can still relate to somebody who does. So, for example, fear of heights. If you don't have a fear of heights, you can understand why somebody else might have it. But take fear of, say, the color purple. Does anyone here have a fear of the color purple? I usually don't get any hands raised to that question. That's all right. Oh, I got one hand. Okay, yeah, great, thank you.
I don't like Oprah Winfrey.
You don't like Oprah Winfrey, okay. Yeah, Steven Spielberg film, right? Yeah. So the color purple could be something that you could be afraid of, and that would be an irrational fear. But it's just as real as a rational fear, in that the same chemicals fire off in the brain, the same biological reactions happen with rational and with irrational fears. We're going to just look at one irrational fear before we move on with this talk. If everyone can see the screen there, we have a word up on the screen. The word is so long I couldn't fit it onto one line, so it's both lines as the one word. Does anyone here know what this word means? It's a type of fear or a type of phobia. Anyone? When I started giving this talk 2 years ago, I found that nobody in any audiences knew what this word meant. But over time, people became a bit more aware of what the word means. So some people, sometimes when I give this talk, people do know what this word means. So what it means is, it's the fear of long words. It's the fear of long words. So hippopotamonstrosesquipedaliophobia is the fear of long words. I had insomnia, I had headaches all the time, I had the focus of a goldfish. I had trouble making new memories for months, so even just short-term memories. So having a conversation with somebody, I would forget what the subject of the conversation was as we were speaking. So that was really confusing things. I also had a thing called Vestibular Imbalance, which is something that we all suffer from temporarily if we have too much to drink. It's where the vestibular canals in the ears stop working. I had that for a long time. In total, I was out sick from work for 2 years. And during those 2 years, I did not know if I was going to recover. During those 2 years, I was way outside of my comfort zone, as you can imagine, with all of those symptoms. Fortunately, I did begin to recover, and I did recover in the end. But as I began to recover, I had a realization that I am so grateful for even to this day. I didn't have a great level of self-awareness at the time, so it's kind of amazing that I did have this realization. The realization was that being inside of the comfort zone, was exactly what had gotten me into this mess in the first place. Being inside the comfort zone. Being inside the comfort zone and not paying attention to other aspects of my life, like physical health and mental health. So I decided I wasn't going to stay inside the comfort zone as I began to recover. I was going to resist that. I was going to fight that. I was going to try my best to go beyond that. So I started to write a list. And the list it's kind of like a bucket list or a challenge list. I've heard someone calling it a happy list. But it's basically a list of all the things that I'd always been afraid to do because I'd convinced myself I didn't have the time or the energy, or I'd been afraid of the results of doing those things. So the list began with physical challenges like run a marathon, climb a mountain, that kind of stuff. And then I started thinking, well, they're not the only things that I've managed to convince myself I can't do. There's loads of things I've convinced myself throughout my life that I can't do. So let's add to this list. So I added things like holding a boa constrictor, eating a scorpion or eating jellyfish. I added things like learning a foreign language, learning coding. All of the things, I tried to look at my life as broadly as possible. And that even meant going onto Google and just randomly looking up lists of things that would challenge and find the things that would challenge me in particular, me specifically. There is a quote which is credited to Albert Einstein, but I'm not certain if it actually was Einstein who said it. And the reason why is that a load of quotes have been attributed to Albert Einstein, and some of them have been proven to not actually be what he said. But it's still a really interesting quote. The quote is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting different results each time. Most of us do that. Most humans do that. Most of us have some aspect of our life, or maybe several aspects of our lives that we're not happy with, that we want to change, yet we keep doing the same things again and again. If you don't know the correct direction to take for your life to get the things that you want, sometimes it takes a while to figure that out. That's okay. Take any other direction. And I don't mean quitting your job and going and, doing something crazy. Maybe that would be relevant for you. But in most cases, what I mean is starting a list, like the list that I started when I was recovering from brain trauma. Starting a list and putting the things on it that when you're being honest with yourself, that you really feel that you aren't able to do that thing.